My hand, if it's not, stop.
You haven't been sneezing the whole time.
It's good to see you. How's the project going to Channel Farm?
Very well.
Okay, all right. Okay. Listen, there's so many projects that go on in the city, and yeah, we need more people. We need to answer Cheryl's question. There's something coming down. Okay. I need to come see. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you all. I had to run and get some water because the bios alone is going to make me thirsty. So I needed my water and update everything else in between. My goodness, this is going to be a heavy panel. But I am excited to introduce these people. I'm sorry. Woo. I am so sorry. Woo, woo, woo. Okay, turn this off. Can I turn this off? There we go. Sorry for the back noise. All right, well, welcome again. Some of you have been here since this early afternoon. We thank you for being steadfast lovers of history and research and preservation. My name is Vicki Bean. I'm the program manager, one of several staff members here who have helped to get this program together. But you know, Ms. Sykes is here. I want to thank her for reminding us that the 30th year has come upon us. So with Ms. Janice Sykes, who, of course, many of you all know, if you've been doing the research for beyond a decade, you will know Ms. Sykes. But we also have Ms. Sharon Robinson, also in the audience. Yay! All right, we want to thank these women and others who have been in the community promoting research, gathering, preserving information, and looking at this current administration. We're going to need to preserve as much as we can, for sure. Absolutely. So we don't want our history erased, and with these men and women who have been writing for a while, teaching for a while, researching for a long time, we want to thank them for their passion and their love of this. So without further ado, I might have to shorten these bios because it's gone beyond 4 pages, so I don't want to take any more time. But I'm going to start with the alphabet, and also my colleague here, Mr. John Alston, who is a librarian here in the Collection Management Division here at Auburn Avenue Research Library. And he's responsible for selecting and cataloging new materials for the reference collection. A New Jersey native. Anybody? Okay. He grew up surrounded by Black culture and history, making it his life's work. And of course, he is a 2009 Morehouse grad. But not only did he just graduate in English literature, but he graduated with honors and also in African American studies. So, good work, good job. There's more to read about this young man, but I'm going to have you all talk to him afterwards. And he might bring up his own history during today's session. Of course, we also have Dr. Maurice C. Daniels, who is the Dean Emeritus and Professor Emeritus of the School of Social Work at the University of Georgia, and is co-founder and director of the Foot Soldier Project for Civil Rights Studies. Fascinating title. I'm looking forward to hearing about this work. He is the author of Saving the Soul of Georgia, Donald L. Halliwell, and The Struggle for Civil Rights, Ground Crew, the fight to end segregation at Georgia State, and the Horace T. Ward desegregation of the University of Georgia. His civil rights advocacy and jurisprudence. Daniels is a senior researcher and executive producer of 5 public television documentaries, including Donald L. Hollowell, Foot Soldier for Equal Justice, Hamilton E. Holmes, The Legacy Continues, and Mary Frances Early, The Quiet Trailblazer. Miss Nedra Deadwyler, is it Nedra or Nedra? Okay, I got it right the first time, okay. It's different when you see it on paper versus saying it aloud, so I want to make sure I got her right. She is a public historian from Atlanta. Her approach centers Black, Indigenous, POC voices in how we talk about place in history. She has nearly a decade of experience in social entrepreneurship, youth development, and has multiple years of providing therapy in a community mental health center. And she's the founder and principal of Civil Bikes, a preservation and heritage tour company based in Atlanta. She received her Master of Social Work from New York University and a Bachelor from Social Work from the University of Georgia. And she's pursuing, I have to make mention of this, pursuing a Master of Heritage Preservation at Georgia State University for, you're near finished, December 2020. That's okay. That is all right. The journey continues. That is all right. And now I'm going to jump to Dr. Maurice Hobson. Yes, sir. We appreciate Dr. Hobson because he is a fan of Auburn Ave. He promotes it all of the time, and we appreciate him doing so. Year after year. He is the Advanced Associate Professor of Africana Studies and historian at Georgia State University. He earned his PhD degree in history focusing on African American history and 20th century U.S. history from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Okay. Didn't know that, sir. All right. I see you. I'm Big Ten, girl. I am Michigan. His research interests are grounded in the fields of African American history, 20th century U.S. history, comparative labor, African American studies, oral history and ethnography, urban and rural history, political economy, and popular culture studies. I don't know what gardening, we need to throw that in there, agribusiness, because you missed the only thing that's missing on here as well. He's the author of an award-winning book titled The Legend of the Black Mecca, Politics and Class in the Making of Modern Atlanta, and the lead historian for the forthcoming With Faith in God and Heart and Mind, a history of Omega Psi Phi fraternity, both in the University of North Carolina Press, as well as a corpus of peer-reviewed journal articles. Okay, this is a long one. I really have to shorten our moderator's wonderful experience in history. And that is Dr. Merrick Harris White's career includes, and that's Dr. Clarissa Merrick Harris White, includes positions, chairs of the Humanities Division at Morehouse College, as interim associate provost of strategic academic initiatives and graduate studies, Lincoln University, Missouri, and provost at Savannah State University. During her earlier tenure at Morehouse College, she was the Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences and the first woman academic dean at the institution, and then associate provost for pedagogical and curricular initiatives. In addition to her current position at Morehouse, she is the convener of the committee to commemorate the Atlanta Student Movement, which has developed the Atlanta Student Movement Initiative to share the stories and lessons of student activism of the 1960s. Now, she has a lot more accolades here, but I want to start the program because I think you all want to hear the speakers more than what they've been doing, because their work shows in their advocacy. So we want to thank our panelists and our moderator, and we hope you enjoy and learn as we all enjoy this brilliance on stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Justine. Welcome, everyone. So glad to see you here. It's an overcast day, a little chilly. So it's really wonderful to see you here. It means that you really love history. You really love this library. And I think you will find this discussion quite interesting. We're going to begin with, can you hear me? Is that good? Okay. We're going to begin with Mr. Alston. And John, if you would just give us an overview of the collections here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library, that would be great.
Sure. Welcome everyone to your Auburn Avenue Research Library. Working in the collection development section, a new division that works closely with archives and is under the archives. I always try to express to people that we don't just collect books and have them sit on the shelves, that all of our collections are growing, changing, and there's things that we're working on this year. I've been working on our vertical file newsletters. So these are a lot of community-based newsletters, so if you love local history, it's there. What I love about Auburn is this is a place for folks like us that do high-level research, whether that's looking at the third floor in our archives where you're doing primary research, or if you're on the floor where I reside, the second floor, which is mostly going to be our book collection, VHS, DVDs, even reel-to-reel film oral histories, and then our bound journals and periodicals, black newspapers, the electronic resources that are available to you. All of these things are old but new, and sometimes it's things that we know that we have, and we're trying to find ways to either make them available digitally or just being able to index them in such a way that you know what we have. I've been shocked this year at looking at newsletters, and here's a newsletter from the Nubians, and here's a newsletter from a neighborhood planning unit. So it's all of these things that we're trying to like really take inventory of what we have. On accident, I found a program from the Thriller in Manila on the second floor. So a lot of times it's stuff that we've been working here, we didn't even know we had. So it's kind of a two-way street in terms of this is an incredible resource on the second and third floor of our space for professional researchers, faculty members, but also for the individual members of the public. And that's what puts us in a very unique place where this is a research library, but we're still a public library. So whether you're just doing your own neighborhood research, your family research, whether it's advocacy or whether it's genealogy, you as an independent scholar, as the family historian, have an incredible resource here. And if you have a Fulton County Library card, you can take that home with you. So a lot of the things that we have available on the second floor, even though they're secondary in nature, we're talking about the Atlanta Daily World, the Los Angeles Sentinel, the Cleveland Call and Post, the Pittsburgh Courier, the New York Amsterdam News, all of these historic black newspapers, we have them in several different formats, whether it's physical copies of what we still collect. We still collect most of the black newspapers that are still publishing in print. We have those electronic resources and databases that I share with you, and then we have these very these nitty-gritty kind of over 700 Georgia newsletters alone, if we're talking about that. So community-based resources that come from your donations, and that's where I mean it's a two-way street. There are things that you may have in your home, there are things that you may have with your elders, where we may need to collect and create oral history or bring those things into our collection. So while we've been talking about how we utilize the library in that sense, I want to express that it's not just for the professional level researchers that are working on documentaries and books, but it's also for you to begin that search. And it may start on that second floor and then wind up in the archives as well. But using these primary resources, using our own tellings of our own story to create the more digestible kinds of research that we do in terms of books, documentaries.
Thank you, John. And I just want to also follow up on what you just told us about this rich collection, or these rich collections here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library, just to note the fact that although we're celebrating 30 years of the existence of the Auburn Avenue Research Library right here in this spot, in this wonderful facility, the history of this library goes back 100 years. Because it started, yes, actually, there was a library here on Auburn Avenue in the 1920s. Then the collection really was established and housed on the West 100th branch of the library, Atlanta Library, and I actually remember, I'm a native Atlantan, so I remember visiting the West Hunter Library right there near Washington High. And it was our neighborhood library, but the collection, there was a small collection at that point, and it grew over time. In the 1970s, it was housed at the main library, the Carnegie Library, downtown, 1970s. And then in 1994 was when the collections were moved here to this wonderful facility. And there was a period of time in which it was shut down for renovations, but throughout this period of almost a century, this resource was developed and it has become really a mecca for researchers in academia and in the community. And that's what's so very important to me, as you've noted, John. This is a resource for everyone. And now more than ever, we need these kinds of resources. Auburn Avenue Research Library was the first library dedicated to the history and culture of, to being a repository of history and culture of African American people in the Southeast. And maintaining this status and being here as this resource during these perilous times, as you know, we're all outlaws sitting up here on this stage because we tell our story, we tell the unvarnished truth. And so in the eyes of many, okay, we could very well be arrested for teaching the truth. Think about that.
And I think to make that homage to history, since you brought it up, if you won't have the opportunity to walk our collection because it's a non-circulating collection on the second floor. But if you ever get a book that has the words WR on that connects it to the Williams collection. So what Dr. Myra Harris was referring to was the Negro History collection that was started by Annie McPheeters back in the 30s that kind of moved around. It found its home in special collections at the Central Library, and that's where you'll hear some of the luminaries that are still with us, like Miss Sykes Rogers, like Skip Mason, when they were working with that collection. It became in the 70s the Samuel Williams collection, who was a former pastor of Friendship Baptist Church. If you see that book with that WR, it was part of that original collection, either meaning that it was developed through those initial purchases or some of the purchases that were made in the formation of Woodruff, like the Bishop College Library. So this was a HBCU that was in Dallas. Sorry, it was in Waco. Paul Quinn took over his campus after it moved to Dallas. But at that time, the decision was made to purchase that library collection, and a lot of those books are still here. So you'll still see the Zale Library from Bishop College. So it's this growing Negro history collection. It is St. Kofa in motion.
Yes, indeed. And so now we're going to talk about some of the wonderful research that our panelists have done in the collections of this library. Research that have informed publications and documentary films and conference presentations, articles. We're going to start with Dr. Maurice Daniels, who is going to tell us about his experiences with the Auburn Avenue Research Libraries, especially on several projects. We're interested in hearing where your journey started with the Auburn Avenue Research Library.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and I would like to thank the Auburn Avenue Research Library for inviting me to participate on this panel, and I'm delighted to participate with such a distinguished group of colleagues. And before I speak about some of my experiences here, which are just golden, I had an opportunity to produce a documentary chronicling the life and legacy of Mary Frances Early. Mary Frances Early is the first African-American graduate of the University of Georgia. In fact, she's the first African-American graduate of any of the so-called white colleges and universities in the university system of Georgia. And in the documentary, Ms. Early talks about how she grew up in a sense, on Auburn Avenue because her father had a restaurant on Auburn Avenue. And as she puts it, she was too young and in the way of her mother and father and others who were running the restaurant, so she would come every day after school to the Auburn Library. And she says that she read every book in the library. And she credits her success in academia in large measure to the Auburn Avenue Research Library. And as you may know, she was valedictorian of her high school class. She was valedictorian of her class at, I guess it was Clark College at that time. She was an honor student at the University of Michigan before she transferred to the University of Georgia. And of course, she did very well, becoming the first black graduate of the University of Georgia. So just wanted to share that. But I've had just a wonderful experience here. I started doing research on a book, on a biography of Horace T. Ward, federal judge Horace T. Ward, in the late 1990s. And Auburn Avenue Research Library was one of my first stops. And it was just very special because of the rich, as has been noted, resources here. And I might even say the vast resources, especially as it related, in this case, to Horace Ward, who actually at one point, legal office was located on Auburn Avenue. I later had an opportunity to work with Don Hollowell on a biography and completed a biography of Don Hollowell. And I can't count the citations in that book from the Auburn University Library, both in terms of information as well as photographs, so on and so forth. So a tremendous resource in all of the research that I've had an opportunity to do. My latest book is titled The Ground Crew, which tells the story of 3 black women who won the first case against segregated education in the state of Georgia. Before the University of Georgia case, before the Atlanta Public Schools case, these 3 women in 1959, with the help of Donald Hollowell, attorney by the name of E.E. Moore, Thurgood Marshall, they won, and Constance Baker Motley, I might add, they won the very first case against segregated education in the state of Georgia. Well, it was special doing research here. One of the plaintiffs worked for the Pittsburgh Courier, whose office was on Auburn Avenue. Another of the plaintiffs worked for the Atlanta Life Insurance Company, whose office was on Auburn Avenue. So they were very much interwoven in this community. And what was special to me, and I think my colleagues would agree, when you're doing this research, you try to get immersed in the culture and immersed in what it must have been like and try to imagine what these individuals went through. And so to be able to be here at the library and then kind of walk down the street to retrace the steps of these individuals, to just try to get in that writing mode, so to speak, it's invaluable. And they were supported, they being the 3 plaintiffs, by the NAACP, whose office was on Auburn Avenue. And so to be able to retrace those steps as well is very, very special. The other thing that I would say that's been so special about my experience, in addition to the valuable or invaluable assets with respect to documents and archival materials and photographs and so forth, is the programming that this library does. It's
I mean, I have so many great memories. The first time I met John Hope Franklin was right here in the Auburn Avenue Research Library, one of the most memorable experiences in terms of my professional life. The first opportunity I met, I guess it was the great-great-granddaughter maybe of Booker T. Washington at a program here many years ago. And so I've also had those kinds of just rich experiences which have been so inspiring. I'll mention one other, and then I'll share the mic with my colleagues. One other experience, which is probably one of the most memorable. Sharon Robinson, who's here, I believe coordinated that program. I had an opportunity to work with a colleague of mine, Dr. Derek Ulrich, who was at the University of Georgia. He's now a professor at the University of Virginia. And he and I produced a documentary chronicling the life of Hamilton Earl Holmes. And before that documentary appeared on public television, the Auburn Avenue Research Library premiered that documentary, maybe in this auditorium. I know it's been, I think, there's been some renovations, so maybe it was in a different place. Okay, that's fair. But it was in this library. And what was so special about that night was Donald Hollowell and his lovely bride, Louise Thornton Hollowell, were present. And they were just overwhelmed because we praised them and we loved on them and we thanked them for all of the work that they had done that made it possible for us to be sitting here this evening, right? That made it possible for us to be able to do the kinds of things that we do. So that's just one example, so to speak, of the kind of special experiences and opportunities that this library has provided to this community and this state.
And I thank you for that book, Dr. Daniels. I actually took classes. I was an English major at Morris Brown College, and Louise Hollowell, the wife of Donna Hollowell, was my teacher. She also taught my parents. And Attorney Hollowell was always so elegant, so distinguished. And so experiencing him was wonderful. And I knew that history after the fact, after I grew up, after I went to graduate school, I learned his importance in the movement. And so your book and that documentary really provides the world with that knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you.
And so on to Dr. Maurice Hobson. Dr. Hobson, talk to us about your first encounter with the Auburn Avenue Research Library, then take us through your trajectory in terms of research projects.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be home. I call this home. This is my academic home. This is one of the places that allows me to have the kind of creative energy that I need to do the work that I do, because it's difficult when you're pulled on to write books and do service and you're teaching and whatnot. So you always have to be in a space. But I saw my good friend and sister Janice White Sykes Rogers earlier today, and I often tell people that everything I've been able to do in this city revolves around Janice White Sykes Rogers. She's Mississippi folk. I am Mississippi blooded. I'm Mississippi born. Grew up in across the South, but spent my formative years in Alabama. But I met Ms. Sykes about 19 years ago, like this week. And I was a graduate student at the University of Illinois. I figured out fairly quickly that I wanted to write a dissertation on Atlanta because I worked for the Olympics in '96. That's how I paid my initiation fee into Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Today marks 28 years of being a member of Omega Psi Phi. But I went to Freaknik from '92 to '97. I'm the biggest outcast and Goody Mob fan in the world. And so when they asked me, well, what are you going to write, I kind of combine all these different things. And I'm being funny when I say this, but I want to have a very serious conversation with you about this. And I come to Auburn Avenue Library during the Southern Historical Association meeting. And I met Ms. Sykes, and when she found out that I had Mississippi blood, she was like, we're cousins. And she opened up everything to me. I'm folk people. I'm in the academy, but not of it. And so we just got along, and she put me in the game. But I want to tell you all two stories just very quickly. In 2007, I was a PhD student doing dissertation research, and I was here in Atlanta, and I hit every archive in Atlanta. I spent a whole year researching in Atlanta at every archive. I spent $8,000. Right now, I currently hold the record for spending the most money at Emory University, right now. I was a Ford Fellow, so I had this money to spend, and I collected all that stuff. It sits in my office right now. And I do work on the Olympics, and so my wife and I going to Sydney, Melbourne, Australia. She was there for a conference, and my job was to look at how Sydney and Melbourne, Australia were franchised for world consumption due to the Olympics, and who are the winners and losers. It's a very different kind of conversation than in Atlanta. And Ms. Sykes said to me, she says, when you come back from Australia, she says, I want you to bring me this book on Aboriginal folklore. So I had flown 24 hours from Sydney to LAX, and then from LAX to Atlanta, and jet lag and all. I come up to the library to give Ms. Sykes this book. And if you know Ms. Sykes, she'll talk to you. And so I walked into the archive, and she's in there, she was grateful for a book, and there was this older black man sitting at a table. And he looks at me and he says, boy, I'm Southern folk now. He said, boy, they tell me you do history. I said, yes, sir. He said, boy, you don't know nothing about no history. And he said, I was the first black man to work at the CDC. And in my mind, I was like, you know, this is not the day I want to have this conversation. I have jet lag. But I'm Southern, so you don't disrespect elders. And he said, well, that was just my day job. And he said, I was really the #1 lieutenant for the #1 number runner in all of Georgia, a man by the name of Wesley Merritt. He said, I was so good at running these numbers that I went to the Players Ball on Christmas Day for 35 years. If you know anything about Outkast on Players Ball, I pulled out all of my equipment at that point in time and did a 6-hour interview with him. See, it pays to be able to engage people, but it gave me an understanding on Wesley Merritt, and I was able to research Wesley Merritt and help the public to understand that Wesley Merritt was considered to be this gangster or whatnot, but his best friend was a guy named Buck Benny. And Buck Benny was Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. Because when Dr. Mays needed money for young men to go to Morehouse, he would send notes to the number runners and they would put $10,000 in a number 2 paper bag. You see how you have to give that history back to people. That's the first story. The second one is in 2014, my wife and I were blessed to be pregnant with my son who's now 10. And my wife struggled, I can talk about this publicly because we have a ministry at our church that works with black women in fertility. It's called the Daughters of Hannah. And my wife was on bed rest. And I was coming in to do research for The Legend of Black Panther, the book that I eventually wrote. And in the midst of that, one day we just go to the doctor for a checkup. They said we're going to keep her overnight. And in the middle of the night, they come in and say, we got to take this baby now. My son was born at 28 weeks. He was 1 pound, 10 ounces. But when Auburn Avenue found that out, Kerry Cotton Williams, Mr. Amalaha, Robinson, Ms. Martin, Ms. Robinson, Sharon Robinson, Ms. Henry, all of them came together and they said, just send us what you want. And I filled out this sheet with all of the boxes and numbers and whatnot, and they scanned it and gave it to me. And when they stepped out there like that for me, I said, as long as I have breath in my lungs, I will champion this library. Because they stood for me when I couldn't stand for myself. So that's part of the reason why I love this library so much, is because they love me. And I love these people. So when I walk these streets of Auburn Avenue, and I have the deeds to every building on this street since 1895. I can tell you what it looks like in different ways and all kind of different things. This is a place that's hallowed grounds for me. And I can talk to you all about that. But what it did is it helped me to produce that book, The Legend of the Black Panther, which then boils over into the Atlanta Child Murder docuseries, the Maynard Jackson documentary. I was chief historian for it. The Eastlake Meadows documentary. I host the show that we did on WABE, Redefining History. The new TV show Fight Night is mine because it's based on an article that was researched here in this library on Muhammad Ali. And I tell the story of when the New York gangsters robbed the Atlanta gangsters. It turns into a podcast. and there's a TV show. What I'm saying to you all is that I recognize that the public doesn't read books, but they will watch TV, they will watch films, they will listen to podcasts, they will pay attention to street markets, and they'll go to museums. If we're going to promote and disseminate African American history, you got to put it in all kind of formats. And so, the last thing I have to say, just very quickly, I work at Georgia State University, and I don't always have a research assistant. And so what I would do to get around that is all of the classes that I teach, I bring them here, and they have to do a primary source project. And it brings the numbers up for the library, but what it did for me is when I was writing the book, it would allow for me to understand the range of the research here, and if the student did a great project that I could use, I would hire them for the summer, and they would work as my assistant. And so that's one of the ways in which I got to know this archive in particular ways, and so I'll always champion this library. This is home for me, so thank you.
Amen. And kudos again to Janice Sykes. And I first met Janice, gosh, it was in the 70s, late 70s, 80s, yeah, at the library, the downtown main library, when the Samuel Williams collection was on the top floor, right? You were there during that time. That's where we first met, I believe. And fast forward many, many years later, encountering Janice again here in this facility. And everything you say, Dr. Hobson, yes, I agree. Just a wonderful, yes, a wonderful, wonderful experience because of Janice and others who have been at this library over time. Shout out to Francine Henderson, who was head librarian head of the library, head administrator from early 2003 to 13, I think it was. And it's been so wonderful meeting Mr. Simmons, who is carrying on the tradition. Yes. Next, we have Nedra Deadwyler. Please tell us your story about how you first encountered the Auburn Avenue Research Library.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here and just also listen to the cultural production from the two Maurices is really amazing. I also have to just also say that this is 30 years ago. I was a student undergrad at university. Well, I mean, yeah, it was many years ago. I was an undergrad at University of Georgia social work program, and Dr. Maurice Daniels was there, head of the department maybe. I don't remember which director of the study program. I probably had a class with you. I met a second cousin in my class as well. And I will just say being a social worker has been a formative aspect to how I look at history and look at community and how I do my work. So I'm really excited to be here. I encountered Auburn Avenue Research Library. I'm sure I probably came as a child because I grew up here. But really formatively with this work, about 10 years ago, I started a project called Civil Bikes. And I had always actually wanted to be a historian and an artist, but those things didn't happen earlier in my life, and I think it's coming to more fruition now. Which Civil Bikes is a biking and walking tour around history, culture, and place. I had lived in New York and Seattle, two cities that were gentrifying when I lived there, and I didn't want that to happen here. And what I learned when I was there was that place really matters, and if you don't know the story there, then it's just like a blank slate. You can make of it whatever you want. So when I came back here, and I was like, I started Civil Bikes, and so I came to the library because I realized I didn't know how to read history, and every book that I picked up, or if I saw something online, I was like, this just does not check out with what I know. It doesn't check out with what I've heard from my elders, just growing up with extended family. So when I came into the doors, and it was the older Auburn Avenue, it was a breath of fresh air. Everyone I encountered, and even still to this day, people that I see from the archivists to the librarians to even just you come in the front door, was very warm and inviting. I come in with questions, and people will walk me through like supportively around like, check out this collection, maybe you want to look here. And for whatever reason, I came in it into doing the research really shy because, one, I wasn't quite sure how to do it. I had not finished an MHP program, a heritage preservation program, so a public historian. So I had to learn on the, like, just by doing it. And I got a lot of just support in that way. And some of the different, I will say, illuminating collections that I've enjoyed looking at, I'm going to say one was Mary Park Washington, who was from Ashby Grove neighborhood on the west side. She was an artist. There was a retrospective art, a show of her work in the gallery the same year that she died. And that year, I was looking at different women from Atlanta just because I wanted to do a tour of formative community builders, women who had really done amazing things. And she was one of them. And I had never heard of her. She graduated from Spelman like in 1945. Her father had a shop, a shoe shop on Hunter, historic Hunter, West Hunter Avenue. And a lot of her ephemera, her art was using newspaper and just like primary documents, her drawing. It's very beautiful, very interesting collage. It's something you would think that would be happening now as collages come back in art. But she was very formative in multicultural arts education. She went around to different communities. I would just say specifically, she was in Asheville with documenting and doing a lot of community work around their heritage, around their history, and using arts in the programming in all of the work. She lived in California, so a lot of her work was done and education was done there. But that struck me because I had never heard about her. I had never seen her art. She went to Black Rock Mountain College, and you don't normally see Black people being in school there, but she was a student there, and she had a very wide range of art that she created, and you know, just really, I would say mind-blowing, right? And other collections, I'm going to blank. I will say right now, currently, so I did a lot of research here based on trying to do tours, developing tours, et cetera, talking to people about place. One of the projects that I've worked on recently is with civil rights. We did a lot of advocacy as a cyclist, longtime cyclist, mobility justice. You know, if you're black, black and brown, walking, driving, on a bike, you're going to get an encounter by police, you're more likely to get encountered by police, also get hit and killed. And the rates are still high now, even after a lot of advocacy. But with that, with that advocacy, I've been in like transportation and kind of interacting with planners. And right now, I mean, it has been with the Biden administration, money was given to communities reconnecting grant. So there is work that's being done around the stitch. My work with that was researching the communities that were displaced by the highway. So coming to Auburn Avenue was a big part of that, from the James Hiram collection to the database of looking at historic newspapers, the Atlanta Daily World. The Atlanta Daily World has been a major resource for pretty much everything. You know, just on some previous panels, they were talking about the Atlanta Constitution and just like what was left out, like the silences. So you really have to go to Black resources to find like Black voice. What were Black people saying? How were we talking about our own experiences that Dr. Daniels was speaking of earlier? So the voices are very important. And then also there's a wide variety of, I'll say, the church bulletins, which are very useful. There's a lot of history that's there. There were churches that were located here that moved to the west side. So just being able to track that and even seeing the histories of going to the east or coming from the east and moving into Atlanta. So these progression of churches and who were at those churches has been a useful resource. And then the oral histories. There's so many different oral history projects just that took place in the neighborhood. Also recordings like Dorothy Bolden's, her oral history is amazing. And it's just, I would say it's transformative. And so many others listening to recently, since we were talking about bootleggers, there's collections of bootleggers talking about bootlegging and running from the police and how people hid their materials. It's very interesting. And so I think those are my encounters, or some of them, but I feel like every time you come, it is like returning back to a familiar place, so it's like home. And it's also, I don't know, it like changes every time. Like there's always something new and interesting and transformative.
Yes, indeed. And you mentioned a couple of collections that really are close to my heart, Dorothy Bolden. And what's so wonderful about this library is that the collections not only include collections, papers, images, from prominent people in the community. That we definitely have those represented here, but we also have people who are grassroots organizers, like Dorothy Bolden. We have a collection here of Elme Brayboy. Yes, we have most people I don't think know who Moses Amos was, but he was a black pharmacist here on Auburn Avenue, the first licensed black pharmacist in the state of Georgia. And so you have these individuals whose collections might not make it into the archives of Georgia State or University of Georgia, or even Atlanta University Center archives, although at that archives we do have a wide range of collections, but here at Auburn Avenue it goes even deeper. And so you have those really collections of people, again, you may not have heard about, but you go in and you see, wow, that individual actually was pivotal, to some demonstration that occurred to protest segregation. And you talked, Nedra, about your research on what happened around the splitting of Auburn Avenue by 75-85, how that occurred, the repercussions of that. And so you find these collections, and if you look deeply enough, you'll see documents, memos, articles that can give you a new dimension that you could not find in other archives. I want to do a quick shout out to, where's Derek? Derek Mosley. Oh, there you are. A Morehouse man who has stayed connected to Morehouse, and he carries on as well that tradition of archivists, of individuals who help to guide people and show people and connect the community to those who are in academia. So I'm applauding the team. Just a minute, applaud the team. Okay, we have another 30 minutes, am I right? Is that correct? Okay. My timekeeper said he's going to keep us on. Okay. So, no, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'd just like to just on that note, as you mentioned, grassroots activists, that's also been one of the richness of the collections of papers here. Although the papers may be in the name of a high-profile figure, so to speak, but in those papers you will find a wealth of information about grassroots activists. And sort of on that note, I also want to call the names, because I did not do that earlier. I talked about 3 women who won the first case against segregated education, but let me call their names. Myra Elliott, Iris Mae Welch, and Barbara Hunt. 3 black women who courageously and audaciously, under much threat and fear and intimidation, decided to walk down Auburn Avenue to Georgia State University to try to secure applications in 1956. Wow. And ultimately won a federal case against Georgia State, banning Georgia State from continuing to the practice of segregation, although they did continue it for a while. None of those women were ever admitted. Although they won their case, Georgia State came up with other, how should I say it, devious ways to keep them out of Georgia State. And I'll just share one of them. One of the things that Georgia State and the state of Georgia did was, these were older women. They were working, one was working, as I mentioned earlier, at Atlanta Life. One was working for the Pittsburgh Courier. And they were older women, non-traditional students, as they are sometimes referred to, all over 21. In Georgia, the state of Georgia actually passed a law that prohibited, after they won their case, any person to enter an undergraduate school in the state of Georgia who was over 21. And the Speaker of the House, of Georgia's House at that time, said, this bill is designed to keep Negroes out. And he did not use the word Negroes. And of course, those documents those documents are obviously emerged within the Auburn Avenue Auburn Avenue Research Library.
Wow, and I'm just going to do a quick aside as a researcher. You mentioned Ms. Welch,
yes,
who was one of the 3 women who filed that lawsuit. By any chance, was she related to Thomas Welch?
I don't believe so.
Okay, Thomas Welch was one of 2 African-American students, high school students, who integrated Brown High School in 1961. So it would be very interesting if there were a connection there. Yeah, so we'll have to explore that. But yes.
I want to say something too, though. So you know, if you look at the archive closely, you'll find T as well, like foolishness. I was in the Andrew Young archives one time, and his ambassador papers are upstairs. And there was this point in time where he has to go to Angola to meet with someone from Cuba. And it says, when you go into the room, this is the information that Andrew Young had as ambassador. It says, when you go into the room with the gentleman that you're meeting, if there's a cold Sprite on the table, that's that man's girlfriend. But if there's a room temperature Coke, that's his wife. And I was just kind of like, you know, like, dang, I mean, they get on this level of intel. And but in working through all of that, when I wrote The Legend of the Black Mecca, there were people who actually thought I was in the CIA because of the amount of research that took place. But we talked about Dorothy Bolden, and if you know about Dorothy Bolden was a black woman activist, founder of the National Domestic Workers Union, really worked for black women to have, you know, benefits and equal pay, uniformity and all kinds of things. And there's an interesting interview that she does, particularly around the Olympics. And it's about an hour and 15-minute interview. I want to say maybe Atlanta Interfaith or something like that. But there's this really long interview. And I was able to get a digitized copy of I don't know if I held, this was a long time ago, so Carrie was able to get me a copy of this interview, and I spliced a piece of it, and if you've ever seen me do a book talk, I'll show it to you. But she starts the interview by talking about how close, this is a working class woman who took no mess from anybody. She was one of those old black grandmas, like the one I had, like children would be seen, not heard, and if you got it wrong, she would get you corrected very quickly. And she starts it out, and she's like, oh, my godfather was Norris Herndon. So the son of Alonzo Herndon. And I mean, she was just I was a pretty little girl. That's how she starts out, a pretty little girl. And she had issues with her eyes. And the Herndon family would pay for her eye surgeries. And she tells the story of how she got into a fight when she was like 13 or 14 because somebody was mistreating her, and that's what led her into activism. And the interesting thing about it is later on in the interview, they say, well, what problems do you have with the Olympics? And she, the way she articulated, she was like, I will fight any politician who wants to come see me. And the reason I'm saying this to you all is that I told you all I was the biggest Outkast and Goody Mob fan in the world. That's how I kind of got into doing this research in terms of how the music debuted. It was really a critique of Atlanta getting the Olympics and what it was doing to black communities. That's what the music was about. It's an archive within itself. But Dorothy Bowden articulated the arc of history on this kind of urban renewal and gentrification that took place in Atlanta. And it's one of those things to where when I show it to people in the public, I said, most of y'all couldn't handle a woman like that. Well, one day I did a presentation and on WABE. And I played this particular piece on the radio, and I get back to my office, and this woman named Dorothy Ingram calls me. And I pick up the phone in the office, and she says, I am Dorothy Bowden's daughter. She says, thank you for remembering my mother. And so we met and we talked, and I invited her to a presentation that I did, and I showed that video. And I could see her, it was right before my own father's transition, but I could see her in the back of the room crying. And I didn't think about it like that. She says, when you lose a parent, she says you can hear certain things that they say to you, but you forget their cadence. You forget, how they move. You forget aspects of it. She said, I was looking at my mother as if she was talking to me. See, we must always remember. I do a talk around the nation called the Memorial Stones. And I tell the story on how, when the children of Israel were in the wilderness and they said how they pulled the stones so that we would never forget the tarrying that took place. This is what archives are good for. So we must always remember.
Yes. Thank you. And with that powerful comment, I'd like to pose the question, how do we on this stage and those in the audience ensure that the Auburn Avenue Research Library continues, at this level and thrives even beyond this level, especially in the climate that exists today and that will become even more oppressive in the coming months and years? What do we do to ensure that this library thrives, and what do we do to connect the community to these wonderful resources that are here?
I've been thinking about this. I am close to a Hall of Fame NBA basketball player. We're in the same graduate chapter. And I proposed to him this notion of Saturday Black History Schools that he's willing to fund. And it's free and open to the public. But this is the only venue that I will allow to be used. And what I'm saying is that you can write 10 million books on African American history from this library alone. It is so vast. It is such an underused resource. Ms. Bean, Vicki Bean, has been really good to me in her new role. My wife is a member of a sorority and she wants to host something, and so Ms. Bean and I were texting back and forth, and I told my wife, I said, now you need to answer this lady. I put my name out here, you need to answer this lady and get this information. But whenever the Alpha Kappa Alpha, her chapter has a meeting down here, all of those AKAs always say, it is so good to be back downtown Atlanta. Like you brought us back to the city. This is at the heart and soul of this city. Everything that we know that is good and great about this city, this particular area is at the intersection of that. You got, a juggernaut in black education about a mile away. You got all kinds of conversations around civil and human rights blocks away and miles away. There's more African American public history in this particular venue than any other place in the United States, and we must take advantage of that.
Yes, for sure. And just a couple of feet next to this building, we have the Apex Museum. And so I'm glad you raised that and noted those things, Dr. Hobson, because a part of what we must do is close ranks.
That's right.
And so we have these repositories of our history, whether they're on the campuses of our institutions or in the community museum next door at Apex Museum, or the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, or on the other end of Auburn Avenue, the King Center, and even the National Park Service, Martin Luther King Jr. Historical Park. It's time to close ranks, okay? And so how do we do that in ways that involve the community? The community has to be central to this endeavor. It can't be an academic exercise.
I will say we started a festival, maybe this coming year will be the 3rd year of that festival. It's called Save Your Spaces. And basically it's this preservation skills share. The first year it happened outside and Derek, the archivist, Atlanta, well, maybe it's Georgia Black Archivist Network. That's not the title, but it's an organization of Black archivists. They were there and shared what is an archivist, how you use the resources inside of libraries and other institutions. And I will say that's one way of getting the community involved. Because I have started a project, I get questions a lot of time, how do you do X? And I don't have the time because I have other jobs to maintain my own life. That is one way. There are people who work with cemeteries or doing oral histories or documentation, public art, just a wide variety and other new ways of doing that. I'm definitely going to talk to Dr. Hobson next year, Mo for next, Dr. Mo, and several other people I met here today. But I think, that whole thing of collaborating and working together, I think that is the way to get more communities involved and knowledgeable about doing the work, because an educator cannot talk to everyone. But if people have the skill set, and people are doing it already, as you sit at the dinner table, you go to Thanksgiving, you're sharing stories, you're talking about an elder or where people used to live. Those stories are always going, but pulling out a recorder and just getting it onto a cassette or in a digital space, it's very important. Digital archiving, there was a workshop earlier, so just being able to share information. And I will say, even outside of social media, there's a group of people who watch social media and are following various accounts that are talking about these practices. But there are also people who are outside of social media because of age or interest. They're not following those accounts. But being able to make sure that far and wide, people are doing it in their homes, in their neighborhoods, is the key. Is another way.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and I would add that, and you touched on this earlier when you talked about grassroots activists. We can never talk too much, or we can never celebrate enough Dr. King and Thurgood Marshall and Rosa Parks and some of the other high-profile civil rights activists and leaders. But we also must focus and refocus on those grassroots activists because their stories are in the Auburn Avenue Library. And as an example of that, when I completed the book on Switch Tyler's, the ground crew on Georgia State, one of the plaintiffs is 88 years young and lives here in Atlanta. And her daughters, after I completed the book, invited me over to dinner. And so I'm expecting, 4 or 5 people. That were 100 people, literally, at the dinner. And so it's their story. It's their story. And so to the extent that we focus on what I call those unsung, lesser known activists and their families. And that's another story that sometimes does not get told. We talk about, for example, Hamilton Earl Holmes was a very dynamic individual, one of the first 2 students admitted, black students admitted to the University of Georgia. But sometimes we forget he had a family. He had a mother, he had siblings, he had grandparents. stories, and they're also part of the story. And those stories are also within the collections here at Auburn Avenue Research Library. So I think that we, to the extent that we focus more on those unsung, lesser known individuals, I think it's a way of sort of pulling in the community to a greater extent than they have been involved previously.
So, Brother Daniels is a mentor of mine. He's a friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time. And when he wrote the book Ground Crew, I teach a class, the history of African Americans in Georgia. And I get the book from the University of Georgia Press. Like, they sent it to me as a reader. And I was like, man, I didn't know Maurice was writing this book. And so he calls me and he says, well, hey, brother, he says, this book is about to come out. He was like, I just want to come down to Georgia State and I want to do a lecture in one of your classes and do something with the black law students. I said, no, Brother Daniels. I said, just give me 24 hours. I was like, I think we can do more than that. And so because I taught the history of African Americans in Georgia, I didn't know I'd been at Georgia State at that time for like 10 years. I didn't know any of this. So it made me revamp the whole class. And I'm a historian that does Atlanta. So I go to the dean and I tell the dean, I say, listen, Madam Dean, the New York Times is about to write a review on this book. And if you all don't get out ahead of this, you're going to look real silly in the newspaper. And so she takes the information, she calls the provost, and what that becomes is the groundbreakers lecture that's held in February. And the interesting thing about that is, which one, was that Miss Myra Elliott? When she showed up at Georgia State, it was in February, it was right before the pandemic. It was cold and rainy. It was colder and rainier than it is today. And it was a packed house. And the president at the time was like, I saw him walk up to Brother Daniels because I told Brother Daniels, I said, let me introduce you. And they usually don't let black faculty do all that kind of stuff, but I introduced him. And I saw the president walk up to Brother Daniels and say, I had never heard any of this. And he just walked off.
Wow.
And I said at that point, I said, we did something good. And so that's the power of the research, because Georgia State desegregates before the University of Georgia. It's supposed to desegregate before. Yes. So, this is the guy right here.
Yes, indeed.
Well, we are each other's mentors. What Dr. Hobson did tell you was before I published my book, I sent it to Dr. Hobson to review it, right? Before the book was published, I sent it to Dr. Hobson to get his blessings and editorial comments on the book. So we're each other's mentors.
Just going back to my own experience for a minute, way back, when I was a student and doing research, and it was so far back, it was not long after the Apex Museum had moved from what was in Ashby Street, Collections of Life and Heritage, to the space, the building, historic building that is next door to this facility. And I volunteered to do an exhibition on the history of Auburn Avenue, Sweet Auburn's Street of Pride. And so I panicked for a minute. I was at that point at Emory, and I said, where am I going to get the information I need? Now, this was before this building was here. That's how long ago it's been. But at the library downtown, upstairs, the Sam Williams collection, I was able to delve into the materials there and got so much of that background information that I needed. I think that was when I first met Janice Sykes. And what I also found, I found the names, information about individuals who had lived on Auburn Avenue, beginning in the early 20th century. I was put in contact with them through someone I met while at where the collection, Sam Williams collection was. I was put in contact with a woman named Kathleen Redding Adams, who, when I interviewed her all those years ago, was almost 100 years old. She remembered the 1906 Atlanta Race Massacre. She remembered the mobs coming toward her family, her community on Auburn Avenue. And so all that just to say, within this facility, we have history, living history, okay? Living history in the sense that this is history, we're connected to our ancestors. We're connected to individuals, everyday people who made profound contributions, as well as being connected in a variety of ways, as Mo Hobson has just talked about, understanding the nuances of some of the work of some of our better known folks, such as Ambassador Andrew Young. So this is a facility that we must always support, utilize, and spread the word about, and drag people into, and bring materials out to the community. And on that, Mr. Alston, I'd like you to speak about what are the possibilities, what are your vision, what's the vision of the library in terms of just talk about possibilities in terms of bringing this history, these collections to the community.
Sure. There's a lot of opportunity in terms of defining new collections. We're looking at the children's literature that we have, especially the award-winning children's literature that we have. I'm very passionate about Black graphic novels and comic books, which is another collection that we have. So anything Black, any intersection of Blackness, even internationally, that is our scope. I think moving forward, there's a couple of different ways to support this place. As we see like the Black population of Atlanta kind of move and be diffused, where Metro Atlanta is still very Black, but the city of Atlanta proper and Fulton County, are we here? So I think ownership is very important. Whether we are specifically constituents of this place or of Fulton County or of the Atlanta Fulton County Library System, that is where we should be voicing our support, both financially, in terms of time, using this library as place. So if you have your organizations, if you have your community-based organizations, your sewing circles, whatever it is, using this library as place, it is free and open to the public for any programs that are held here. Donating your time, your ancestors' time, whether that's if we put out the call for oral histories, because this is a dynamic situation, whether that's being more vocal at the county level or in the foundation level of financially supporting Auburn Avenue Research Library, but really trying to, there's so many different ways in which we can grow in terms of publishing, in terms of putting on programs, doing things that we traditionally do to bring people in. When I was a student, when I was an undergrad, my first visit to the upstairs auditorium was for a film festival. So we do try to host these community organizations as a way to not only give back, but also to bring people in. The work products that are produced through scholarly research that are turning into things that are consumable for the average person. There's a lot of academic books that we purchase that are going to be dense reads, but then you have something that can flip it, that may turn it into historical fiction or into a film or into a graphic novel. For example, if you're an Octavia Butler fan, all of her novels are now being turned into graphic novels. That's somebody else, that's another way to kind of bring people in, and then some of her things are being turned into shows and series. But I think ownership of this place is important, and advocacy for this place is going to be important, as well as what does it look like moving forward. We have to create this new history, and so any of these kind of novel concepts, we are interested, and we have the resources there. Even when students come in, I had a student come in from Georgia State that was a designer, and so he was interested in like old Jack Kirby Black Panthers, but also in Jets and Ebonies. And if you're a fan of Black magazines like I am, I love Black magazines and Black newspapers, even just for the ads. How are we being advertised to? How are we being portrayed? What are our ideas of self in terms of self-advertisement? How are American companies advertising to us? And then from a historical research perspective, especially with Black newspapers, what are the businesses that exist? Where are the addresses? And there's kind of a brain drain in Atlanta that has happened too. If you look at the old history of Auburn, a lot of Black businesses, a lot of Black entrepreneurship took place right on this street. If you look at the faculty directories of the AUC, most of the faculty lived in West End at that time. That's not the case anymore. Most of us don't live on Auburn. Most of us don't do our business on Auburn. So how do we protect this place to not only document that history, but also to show where we're going, and also as a meeting place to plan, prepare, plot, protect those next movements. So those are the ways that I think we need to do is, even though we may be in different parts of town, we may live outside of Atlanta proper, how do we get in our mind, the same way New York has the Schomburg, how is this, what we know it to be as researchers, how is that commonplace for the individual citizen as well? And that's why I always try to introduce it as it is your Auburn Avenue Research Library. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to the South, that we need to be this beacon. And it was we kind of have this kinship with the Schomburg, but how do we have this this idea of ownership and this place? This is the first place that you look, if it's local history, if it's Southern history, if it's Black history internationally in the South, this is the place.
Yes, yes, indeed. Now, according to my iPhone, we have 4 minutes. So in these 4 minutes, if each of the panelists would just give us some final words. What do you want to leave with this audience? What do you want them to take with them that is related to our topic, the Auburn Avenue Research Library?
Yeah, I would just start and say, first of all, I owe a great debt of gratitude to the Auburn Avenue Research Library, to Ms. Sykes and Ms. Robinson and Carrie Cotton Williams, Anita Martin, and Okize, and Derek Moses. And the list goes on. I'm probably in trouble naming names, so I just want to say I owe a great debt of gratitude to be able to tell stories about grassroots activists as well as civil rights leaders, more high-profile leaders who've had a tremendous impact on our state, on our nation, on our democracy, on the cause of social justice. So I just want to say thank you. And certainly I completely agree with everything that has been said in terms of the things that we need to do as a community and as individuals to preserve this great resource.
Thank you.
I also want to say thank you to the Auburn Avenue Research Library. And one of the ways in which we can continue their efforts is we can become friends of the Auburn Avenue Research Library. We can reach into our pockets and give some money. I sound like a preacher, but and we're in unprecedented times. The interesting thing is, what we witnessed before, we've seen before, but this is new. And if institutions like this are going to exist so that we can produce histories of a group of people who not only built this nation but are central to this, we have to give more than our time and energy. We got to reach in our pockets. So I would hope that you all become friends of the Auburn Avenue Research Library.
Thank you. Andrew?
I would say yes, ending with some gratitude, because without this, we would not know who we are. This is a very important place, and we make that place and we keep it. And so I would say, with my colleagues, friends, I would say, host an event here. From an art party to how do you use the archives, to a screening, to a conversation. There are a lot of salons that are taking places, and that is great, but also you can incorporate something here. A field trip with a group that you are with. I bring my summer camp, we come here, the students, we come here. So bring whoever people come to town, bring them here to see, because there are galleries and there's always something that's in the gallery. Yeah.
Great.
Follow them online.
And Mr. Alston, I'd just like you to stand along with everyone in the room who is a part of the staff of the Auburn Avenue Research Library. If you would just stand, please, all the... Including the retired, yes. So thank you all, thank you, Auburn Avenue Research Library, for giving us the opportunity to tell you how much we appreciate you, love and appreciate you. And thank you all who, again, have come out to hear this conversation and be a part of this conference. What is it? Collecting, doing research and writing while Black. And this is indeed, yes, an important topic, especially in these times. So thank you all. Thank you very much.
We need this every year, Victor. We need a conference of this magnitude every year.
I'm low key.
I just asked for the money. For the
I'm laying in the cut. Yeah, I mean, the plan is for this to happen every year. The plan is that, for this to be where you're like, I gotta get on this list now because if I don't, I'm gonna miss out. I mean, you won't miss out because we are streaming this on YouTube right now. But sometimes you want to be in the house. You want to be able to shake a hand, to just be able to be in the same space as Dr. Daniels stated. All of the different individuals that he met in this building. Since I've been here, it's been the same for me. It's always like, man, I can't believe, like I'm not one that fans out for someone, but I don't do it in front of them. I do it when I get home and I start telling it to my wife. But this place is truly unique. I'm a New Yorker who moved to Atlanta. I moved here for a reason. Okay, so all of you Atlantans don't get upset when I told you I'm a New Yorker. But I moved here for a reason because I love this place. And so, there's nothing like it. I mean, I worked for New York Public Library. I have plenty of friends at the Schomburg. I can tell you that I get calls sometimes about what we do here. So, truly appreciate, there's not many institutions like this in this country. We are blessed and highly favored to have a place like this. I'm blessed and highly favored to call this my place of work. I'm blessed to know and meet individuals like the individuals on the stage. And I'm thankful for all of you to be here tonight. So I hope that you're going to stay for the final thing for the day, the keynote speaker, Herman Mason. But thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you all for being on the panel. Continue to support us. Thank you.